Twat. What? No. Twitch chat. There we go. Let's begin our patch run and hope it's not out of sync too badly. Let's begin. Hello everyone, welcome to my patch 7.11 rundown. Hope you guys enjoy. This is a pretty interesting patch. It will be most pro leagues week 2 and week 3 patch for those who follow professional League of Legends. For those playing just solo queue and normal games with friends, I think there's a lot of cool things in here. There's basically 3, let's call them small scale reworks, and then a couple of small changes overall. It's probably a fairly light patch, but there are some big ones if you play one of the 3 champions, or you might see one of the 3 champions. So let's scroll down to the first one, which is the fact that, yes, Rek'Sai, Kindred, and Malzahar are all getting large changes, and wow, it's more than a page for Rek'Sai. Okay, let's start with the easy stuff. Basically, so let's start with the goals, basically. Rek'Sai, the goal is to make Rek'Sai less of a tank and more of a damage threat. Like, the ideal is probably that Rek'Sai starts going for a Black Cleaver and Titanic Hydra and builds more like a Kled or a Jarvan and less like a Sejuani. I think they really want Rek'Sai to be more of a fighter. I think the specific class would be Diver. And there's definitely some really big assassin potential on Rek'Sai, and we'll get into that over time. So part of that is Rek'Sai's health is going down a little bit. Here's the chart for that. You can see that it goes down to 96% durability by the end of the game. Unfortunately, covering over gives me that, which is too bad, so that's going to make things a little bit awkward. But essentially, the durability is in the high 90s, and the more health you buy, the less this matters. It's a very, very small nerf. Okay, whatever, small nerf to health, let's move on. There's a couple of nested changes to how Rek'Sai's passive works. And if you don't know how Rek'Sai's passive works, basically, when you're unburrowed and you attack or deal damage to something, well, when you attack or cast spells onto things, you gain Fury. And when you burrow, your Fury heals you over time. Essentially, you're now gaining more Fury per attack and spell, but the amount of healing is going down per point of Fury. So maybe you're healing more, maybe you're healing less. It's absolutely less than a full Fury bar, but you might have not had a full Fury bar before. So let's go over some of the numbers with that. As we pull this one up, we can see that a full bar, which is right here, is obviously quite a bit smaller. In the early game, it's, 2/3, half as good. In the late game, it's, well, really just half as good. Pretty much it breaks even and stops really getting much worse by like level 7 or whatever. But this is the ratios you're looking at here. This is okay, well, because the duration was cut from 5 seconds to 3 seconds, maybe the healing per second is better, right? Like, if you need to live over the course of 3 seconds or something, okay, well, that's less of a nerf, but it's also kind of irrelevant. The health per second is really not that valuable of a change. What's really the big deal here is this, okay? So we'll go back to the patch notes. It now gives you 25 out of a max 100 for any attacker unburrowed ability. So 4 hits on an enemy champion maxes out your Fury. Before, it used to be 5 for an unempowered basic, 10 total if it was like an empowered basic attack, and if you like AoE'd them, then you got another 2.5. Like, okay, so this got like doubled to 5x based on what's actually happening. So what I did is I basically said, okay, well, if you had an ability primed, like you're using her E or using her empowered Q autos, you are getting this much health back per auto attack or ability. And here you're getting this much health back per auto or ability in 7.11, which is higher. So in a shorter duration skirmish, if you're burrowing more frequently, Rek'Sai is getting more healing. If you are not burrowing very frequently, you are getting less healing. It will take some time for people to figure out how much this is going to really matter. But on the one end, you're getting more health per hit. On the other end, you're getting less max health if you're maxing out Fury. So the reality is somewhere in the middle between buff and nerf. I'm going to go ahead and say it's probably a nerf to overall healing in general, but not by insane amounts. Not by as much as this number would have you believe, because you're not doing full Fury burrows. Okay, next change. Queen's Wrath, her unburrowed Q auto attack buff, lost 5 damage per rank up, but it got double the attack damage ratio. Next one up, by the way, is there is a new bonus attack damage ratio added to her burrowed Q, the long-range skill shot. but the damage changed to physical, which can be a nerf. Let's unpack these changes. Okay, well, first off, here's the Queen's Wrath damage, and you can see that because the rank 1 damage is the same, the simple fact that the AD ratio is higher means that these numbers are a bit higher in the very early game. And by mid to late game, if you're building full tank, and I want to point out, by the way, that I am including typical runes and masteries in this calculation, which means running natural talent in the, I think it's called the ferocity tree, and you're running attack damage marks, which means you have 10.55 plus 4/9 per level bonus attack damage from runes and masteries, which is where these numbers are now coming from. And you can see, of course, if you're building full tank, if you're going Cinder Hulk and a Dead Man's Plate, your Q does less damage by a factor of 19% or 29% or something like that. However, I included this column here, which is the amount of attack damage it takes you to buy to equal, and then beyond that, buff the damage output from the Q. And it's in the 60s to 80s once you hit mid to late game, which means Black Cleaver plus Titanic Hydra, you are now doing more damage than before, which old Bruiser Rek'Sai were doing, so that build is essentially unchanged. Right, early Warrior Enchant by level 7 is a buff. If you grab an Infernal Drake or things like that, basically it's going to require you to have 2 attack damage items to get more damage. Full tank, again, will do 29% less damage. And once you get 2 attack damage items, maybe your 3rd item, Guardian Angel, maybe you grab a Maw of Malmortia or something in there, you're going to start seeing bigger returns off the damage. There's the break-even point in the 80s. Then we talked about Prey Seeker getting a new attack damage ratio. Well, again, I calculated with runes and mastery, so you're seeing a 7 to 3 to 4% damage buff just from the basic runes and mastery, so that tank Rek'Sai might technically do more damage. I also included a column. This is scaling. This is how much more damage you're doing with 100 attack damage. Obviously, the fact that it is a 0.4 bonus attack damage ratio means that you're obviously getting 40 damage for every 100 attack damage you're gaining. But I did it as a function of how much damage the ability did already. How much gain am I really getting out of this? And every 100 damage gives you 20-something% more damage, which is pretty good. It's a pretty decent buff to have 20% more damage per 100 AD. That feels pretty decent. And then what I also included is, I said, let's say you're attacking someone like Ashe. I looked at Ashe's base stats, included her typical Rune of Mastery build, and said, do I gain or lose based on her having more armor than magic resist? And of course, this could change based on her buying Ninja Tabby. It could change based on her buying a Hex Drinker. It could change based on you having a Black Cleaver. It could change based on a lot of things. But just counting base stats, runes, and masteries, the fact that it becomes physical damage means it's going to do less damage in the late game as the ability is maxed out and does more damage. So you actually do less poke unless you can make up for it with buying about 100 attack damage, which means this ends up being more of a neutral change in actual real-world damage output. The one thing I will say, and credit to a Reddit comment for pointing this one out, is it now means that your long-range Qs trigger Black Cleaver, which give you movement speed, because it simply requires dealing physical damage to trigger the movement speed portion of Black Cleaver. Of course, it'll armor shred as well, and that's nice, but you can now use Prey Seekers to zip around the map a little bit more, which is kind of cute. It's nice to see, right? So that's kind of cool. More damage changes. We're continuing to, unravel all these changes. Okay, the damage changed, higher early game, less late game. The knockup is no longer a multi-target knockup. It's a one champion knockup, so it's the one that you right-click on. The rest get knocked back. I assume those still take damage, but regardless, the damage is not very high. And the immunity to being knocked up a second time no longer scales with rank, so you're getting less knockups. Your primary target knockup is arguably better. It went from half to 1 second based on distance to just 1 second always, so that's arguably a buff to your single target CC if you're going for dueling, which is the goal of the Rek'Sai changes. She's going to be a better duelist. So what this means basically damage-wise is this graph here. Again, we counted the fact that there's an attack damage ratio, and throughout most of the game, it's a 20% damage buff. In the very late game, you lose some after the rank ups, but you max W last anyway, so who cares? For most of the game, you do more damage. Okay, so you do a bit more burst. That's cute. Wonderful. And a nice little change. You can interact with plants while burrowed. That's kind of cool. All right, this one requires some math. Furious Bite, instead of being a pretty generous total attack damage ratio, now has a base damage and a lesser bonus attack damage ratio. It also lost the linear damage amp, where if you had 50 out of 100 Fury, you would do 1.5x damage. But it did keep the when full at Fury, you do double damage and it deals true damage. Now, this looks like gigantic nerfs, but there's one thing you've got to remember, which is the fact that you got way better Fury generation. Way better Fury generation. So the damage is usually down, and we'll show that here, but Fury generation is a really big deal. Okay, so let's look at the damage of the ability. Technically, in the early game, it's actually a bit better. Very, very early game, levels 3 and 4, but as soon as you start putting points into it, and as soon as you start leveling up, because again, the old version had a total attack damage ratio, meaning it scaled with your character level. This no longer does. The base damage of the ability actually gets cut pretty hard, and it's going down to about 2/3 of the damage at the very late game. Also, remember that the attack damage ratio is also 2/3 of what it used to be, because it's 80-something instead of 120. So, okay, it's doing 2/3 as much damage by the late game. This sounds like a nerf. Well, it would be. However, I have watched a lot of Rek'Sai. I have seen a lot of pro Rek'Sais play League of Legends. And basically every time a Rek'Sai comes to gank, they burrow forwards, they knock you up, they hit Q for the attack reset because the W counts as an auto attack as far as attack resets are concerned. They knock you up, they hit Q, they hit, and they hit E, right? And what that means is for a normal Rek'Sai, they were getting 40 Fury and then hitting the Furious Bite. The knockup gave them 10, and the 3 empowered Qs gave them 10 more each, and they were hitting you with 40 Fury, which means they're doing 1.4x this damage right here. In the new version, knockup Q auto is 100 Fury, meaning it's double damage, and it's true damage. And that's what this chart means, that if we're playing tank Rek'Sai and we're doing that combo, you're doing 50% more damage when you first try to do it, and even then by the end game you're still doing like 13 to whatever percent more damage, and it's true damage, which means it's even more damage than this number even implies. We also looked at the attack damage ratio part of it as well, because this is if you're a tank, but if you're buying attack damage, well, even the attack damage ratio is, even at the very, very end of the game, a bit higher. What this means is if you're doing those combos, which is the very common one for a Rek'Sai who's trying to gank somebody, then this is the case. What it seems to be is basically, because you're building this Fury so quickly now, you have a lot of incentives to unburrow, go for the combo, burrow again, heal back up, and you're kind of going back and forth and back and forth. That's what you're kind of having to see. So, is it always a buff? No. But in most uses it is. So even though these numbers look absolutely terrible, and these numbers look terrible as well, in most use cases this is a buff, which is a pretty significant damage jump, and okay, Rek'Sai can be happy. Some changes to how quickly you can tunnel. Both the base cooldown and the reentry cooldown are getting shortened, and substantially so. 10 to 6 becomes 10 to 2. Quick chart on that. Not that it's very hard to look at, but basically, this is the ability that you max second, and so by the mid game, you're getting back into your tunnels, about 1/8 to 1/4 faster. But the really big thing is the fact that by level 13, you have a 2-second cooldown on re-entering your tunnel, which means when you go to gank someone, you tunnel in, you knock them up, you hit Q, you attack them 3 times, you land your E, now that you've got full Fury, you deal double damage, and by the time you're done doing that, your tunnel is back available to leave. Which, and keep in mind that because you went for the unburrow, the first 1 full second of that, they were knocked up into the air. So you've got some very obvious, insane trading patterns where you knock them into the air, you do a true damage nuke, and if you want out, you can just do that right away. And so Rek'Sai is going to be absolutely insane. It's much more skirmishy because you're building full Fury really quickly, you're popping off the E, you can unburrow back down to heal back up, and it's all short engagements. Using Rek'Sai properly is going to take a new skill set for a lot of players. It's going to be difficult to play around this properly, but it can be insane, and this change really might make Rek'Sai insane. There's a decent chance that even though Rek'Sai lost some of her tank builds and everything else like that, this change has the potential to be actually bonkers. I'm missing something that I didn't upload. Okay, it's down here. This is a mistake. Okay, so the one other major change, and this is actually the major change here. The ultimate is entirely new. Void Rush has been completely reworked. So you no longer have the global dash to a tunnel from out of combat. It is now a targeted leap as long as you have damaged them recently, within, I believe, its last 5 seconds. So if you land a Prey Seeker, if you auto-attack them and they lease in, kick you away, it has 1500 range, meaning it's almost impossible to not be able to ult them. It's going to take 1.1 seconds to reach the target. There's a 0.35 cast animation and then a 0.75 leap. You can't stun Rek'Sai out of either half of that. It just lets you know, I'm charging at you, rawr, and then she's there, right? The damage is somewhat low initially, but there's a really generous attack damage ratio. There's missing health damage as well, and honestly, this is insane because a level 6 Rek'Sai comes to gank top lane after a trade, and as long as you land Prey Seeker, which you can cast from Fog of War because the range is that long, you then jump on them for a quarter of their missing health, and you just do 1,000,000 damage. And using this ability properly is like the entire reason Rek'Sai will be good. You lose a lot of the uptime of being on the map, of course, and crucially, because the old ability is not listed, you lose all the free attack speed the ability used to give you. I'm almost certain that the old passive goes away, and the old passive was 20, 40, or 60% bonus attack speed based on ability rank. So this right here is Rek'Sai's attack speed, given normal runes and masteries. She's actually not likely to buy any attack speed items either, and so these numbers are probably going to stay. As soon as you hit level 6, you lose 14% of your outputted attacks per second. At level 11, you lost 23%. At level 16, you lost 30% of your actual total attack output. So Rek'Sai lost a lot of her sustained DPS. I am almost certain that, yes, that the attack speed is gone from the passive. I don't know for certain, but I'm almost guaranteeing it's true. I didn't play Rek'Sai in PvE. But what it comes down to is now your dedicated sort of fight damage did go down. So you got an assassination ultimate, you got true damage burst off of 4 auto attacks, like you got insane tunnels, but you lost the global map ability and you lost the sustained DPS. You can't get this back really. There's no way to get this back reliably. So there's some give and some take. This is a pretty big nerf, and you won't notice it from the patch notes. If you weren't a big Rek'Sai player, you'd forget about the attack speed being there. But as you can see, the actual output is pretty meaningful. I talked with Zyrene about these changes. He actually is pretty convinced that top lane Rek'Sai is going to be insane because of how good the trades are going to be. And that if you're able to win a trade and get them down to half, you just like ult onto them again and they just die. So there can be some pretty insane things coming out of this one. TLDR on Rek'Sai, much more damaging champion. Excited to see what comes out of it. Tunnels are going to be insane, and it's going to take time for people to get used to the fact that they have essentially 2 new abilities, which is the tunnel re-entry and the entirely reworked ultimate. But it's going to be fun to watch the champion come out. Major changes to Kindred. Now, I am so happy personally with the direction of the Kindred changes. I don't think it's literally perfect, but I'm so glad that Kindred has better baseline effectiveness and the power of her stacks has gone down. Okay, the major thing is the stack no longer gives you on-hit damage on your auto attacks. That is huge. You're no longer doing like 5-6% of someone's current HP as damage on every auto attack, which meant all you could do is build attack speed, and then you built tank afterwards, and you tried to be a bruiser at that point and just rely on percent health damage to do everything. Now, Kindred builds like a real marksman, and instead they gain some attack range at 4 stacks and a little bit less every 4 stacks afterwards. Worth pointing out, by the way, that 8 stacks is kind of on the high end. Like, you might have seen some videos by content creators who were like, here's 1,000 stack Kindred, look how much range we have. And like, okay, that's cute. But Kindred spawns at 500 range. You're going to pretty reliably get to 575. And then you're going to sometimes get to 600, and then pretty rarely get above 600. 12 stacks is pretty rare on Kindred. What it means is you get to be a real marksman. You're going to have 575 range at least in most of your games, as long as you don't get completely boned on stacks, which you shouldn't. But if you have a crap game, you're going to have a crap game. But 575 is really nice, right? That's in between Vayne and Ashe, right? Which is like pretty solid. So that's kind of cool stuff. Yeah, Vandrel was the guy. Give him a shout out. He's a cool guy. He makes really cool stuff. It also empowers her other abilities. Sorry, their other abilities. I always consider only Lamb. So Q, instead of gaining damage per rank up, gives attack speed. W actually is functionally unchanged. This is exactly the same mechanic. And the E now gains range from Death's Reach from the new passive. It also gains missing health damage per stack, which is new. So let's start going into some of these major changes because the base stats change as well. Okay, well, attack damage per level, you can see the old attack damage values, the new attack damage values. It eventually is an 11% damage increase. Now, that's not really authentic and accurate because, of course, Kindred will be building damage items. For some reason, I didn't include Runes and Masteries here. I probably should have, but I didn't because I wanted to see just how pitifully low Kindred's attack damage actually was. And it was 83. Now it's 93, which is much nicer. Could have gone higher, personally. I wanted Marksman to end up at 100 attack damage usually because that feels more fair, but whatever. Kindred got some damage back. That's cute. So let's talk about the fact that Dance of Arrows got some changes. Okay. So it grants attack speed now, and it grants more attack speed per stack instead of gaining 5 damage per stack. Does the attack mechanic get better? Yes, it does. I would generally say that gaining attack speed at all is a buff, and then 5% attack speed per stack is going to give Kindred... it's going to give Kindred part of an auto attack, but part of an auto attack is better than 5 damage in almost all cases. So the stacking mechanic is a buff. The fact that it exists at all to give attack speed is a buff. The dash speed going higher is a buff because you were stuck waiting for your animation to complete before you could start attacking again, which means your DPS goes higher based on this. What it did lose is some base damage because the total attack damage ratio is gone, but the bonus attack damage ratio was significantly higher. So let's math it out. If you were simply AFK and had, I believe it's still no runes and masteries, and just simply waited to scale up into the game. Actually, it doesn't matter. Whatever, it's close enough. Even if you didn't build any damage items at all, the damage is not very far apart. The bonus attack damage ratio is good enough. And actually, it looks like I did include runes and masteries because clearly having any damage at all must include runes and masteries. So this does include runes and masteries. I take that back. I know I did include it. And even just with runes and masteries, you're only losing 5% of the damage. Like, the fact that you lost a crappy total attack damage ratio means nothing at all. What you should be happy about is the fact that it takes you literally 2 longswords for the ability to always be buffed. Again, I think the per stack mechanic right here is superior, and the damage is higher if you buy literally 2 longswords. So Dance of Arrows does more damage and grants attack speed and moves faster. This ability was straight buffed. Sweet, let's move on. Kindred's W has some pretty big changes, and these are pretty cool. You can now set the zone. Instead of just centering on yourself, you can push it forward, which is really valuable because it does current health damage. And current health damage, obviously, you want at the start of a fight. Obviously, that's very valuable. So you're getting some pretty nice things out of this. You can kind of guarantee that the W is going to attack for more of the uptime. It also means that you can kind of guarantee that you'll be inside the zone more often because your Q has a cooldown reset if you use it inside the W zone. And so this is a major usability change that I'm not going to say massively, but it does meaningfully increase the value of this ability. This change right here, if it was the only thing at all, would be a pretty meaningful buff. Now, what has changed is the attack damage ratio has gone down from 0.4 total AD to 0.2 bonus AD, so halved the ratio, and no longer scales off of their own base attack damage ratio, or just base attack damage in general, but has gained a 1.5% current health damage on hit. Want to point out the 0.5 per mark of the Kindred stack is the same as before the patch because that's how much it gained from the passive anyway. So this part is entirely unchanged. What it lost was a ratio. It changed damage types, but it gained some flat percent current health damage in the first place. What does this mean for Wolf's Frenzy? Well, you can see the damage got roughly halved because of the fact that there is no longer a total attack damage ratio. It used to do 85 something damage. Now it does like none. So you're doing half damage. And because of that, I looked at the numbers for how much health does my target need to have for the damage to be the same. And at level 1, it's 1600 health. Pretty much nothing you kill has 1600 health. That just doesn't happen. So it's going to be slowing. It's going to be slower in the jungle. It's going to be worse for ganks. This is weaker. In fact, the fact that it does magic damage instead of physical also weakens it in the early game because enemy champions almost always spawn with more magic resist than they spawn as armor. Over time, this kind of gets better, and now Kindred has a percent health magic damage thing so that if someone armor stacks against them, there's still like some mechanic out there that just scales for free anyway with them buying Randuin's Omen. It goes, that's cute. Your randoms means nothing. I'm just doing this to you. So that's a little bit nice. And I know the designers sometimes like to include different damage types for that reason. And again, getting up to 2500 HP in the mid to late game is not as hard for that. So, you know, the W poke. And what's cute is actually because you can set the zone forward, like you can set it and then stand in the back and just have the wolf attack things. And, you know, maybe you can do some cute things there. Maybe that's going to be a little bit useful. Maybe. Either way, this ability got essentially nerfed. It's weaker. That's just kind of a fact. All right. So Q got massively better. The passive got arguably weaker, but I think the champion's healthier as a result. W got weaker. E got changes, which I would argue are close / probably a buff. We'll see. Okay, so instead of doing... so E, if you don't know, you target enemy with it. It slows them, and if you get 3 auto attacks off, it does a bunch of bonus damage. That bonus damage is no longer 5% of their max HP. It is 8% of their missing health, meaning... while with the wolf, you want to hit them, with Wolf's Friends, you want to hit them at the start of the fight with it. You want to hit Mounting Dread at the end. Now, unfortunately, the delayed payoff and a slow are anti-synergistic goals, right? You kind of want to put a slow on at the beginning or middle of a fight, but missing health damage you want at the very end of a fight. So it's a little awkward, but at the very least, once they're at half, you hit E, then you can train them down, and okay, it's not the worst thing possible. And I will show you where the break even on this is. The base damage itself went down pretty substantially per rank, but it's also not that important because you're probably maxing it last regardless. It got a gigantic ratio increase. The missile speed went up quite a bit as well, which is nice, which means Wolf hits the thing faster, which is just a nice sort of usability little boost. And it can sometimes deal bonus damage, which means this is going to deal double damage, and this is going to deal double damage, based on how low they really are. So if you can properly wait to trigger this and get their damage, get the damage dealt and get them super, super low, now you suddenly, well, not double, but 50% bonus damage, still a lot. It's going to add quite a bit here. It actually makes this damage meet up, and it makes this bonus attack damage ratio insane. And this ratio increases based on crit chance, so theoretically, it can crit for 1.5x if they're still at 2/3 health. That's what it means. You're not going to get a 100% crit chance, but... I'm really not including this in any of the math because it's kind of hard to use. So let's talk about what actually changed here with this, which is the damage is very close. It's 90% as effective for most of the game. And because of the massively higher attack damage ratio, it requires you to buy less than a longsword for the base damage on this ability to be higher. So your E payoff for all intents and purposes for basically the entire game, because if you don't have 100 attack damage to level 18, you're doing something wrong, E does more base damage. In the real world, E does more base damage. What I also did was this column right here, which is because it went from 5% max HP to 8% missing HP, at what point is that equivalent or better? And it's this number right here. If normally I'm doing this based on what level the champion is. This is actually instead how many stacks you have. At 0 stacks right here, if they're at 37.5% HP, if they're at basically 3/8 health, it is the same. So if you're hitting a champion with 3/8 HP, it is the same right here. If you have 1 stack, because the missing health damage is going higher and higher and higher, they can be at basically half HP by the time they're into the mid game, and it's better. So as long as, essentially what this means is, as long as you're hitting reasonably injured targets, this mechanic got stronger. And again, because it is a pretty substantial missing health, it's 8% plus 0.5% per stack. And again, you're going to look at, 6 to 8 stacks in general in a game, meaning you're looking at, a solid like 12% missing health or something. 10 to 12% missing health. You're looking at around this area, where as long as they're around half HP, you're getting more damage out of it. Overall, I would say Mounting Dread got buffed. So Mounting Dread got buffed, Wolf's Frenzy got nerfed, Q got buffed, moving on. In total, Kindred still does the same things. You're still going to do a lot of similar situations and doing similar things in the game. But the fact that you're going to get real attack damage is a huge, huge, huge buff. And you're also going to be building attack damage more than attack speed, as you no longer have a free Blood Razor passive. Which means you're probably going Warrior Enchant. It means you're probably going to build real damage items like a Rapid Fire Cannon and an Infinity Edge. That's what I would guess we're going to see out of the champion now. We're going to see you buying actual attack damage items, and with real attack range means you're going to be in a good spot. That's how I feel about this. I think Kindred is going to be more usable. I think people will take some time to get used to the champion. They're going to be building the wrong items in the beginning and bringing the wrong runes and masteries and stuff. And Kindred will probably start day 1 or 2 with a lower win rate, but I think end of the day, Kindred is going to be a bit more powerful. All right, substantial update now to Malzahar. Okay, so major overhaul to how Void Swarm works. Instead of stacking up ammo and you kind of double tapping W and you sending the Voidlings after them, and if they attack, they multiply, it works entirely different. And I want to point out real quick, Jungle Malzahar is dead. I am almost certain Jungle Malzahar, ripping pepperonis, it is gone. Maybe I'm wrong about this because of the lower cooldown, but until you get level 3 on Malzahar, jungling on Malzahar is going to suck. Voidlings will do less damage early game. They are less tanky early game. You don't get as many of them early game. It's going to be real difficult. Now, Jungle Malz is kind of already on its way out, but it's real gone. Okay, so Void Swarm lost a lot of its level up incentives. Okay, let's actually look at this properly. Okay, so again, instead of having an ammo system, it is a simple spawn a Voidling with an 8-second cooldown. So every 8 seconds, you can spawn a new Voidling, and the Voidlings actually last 8 to 10 seconds based on rank. That's farther down in the patch notes. What's cool, though, is instead of spawning 1 Voidling, you spawn 1, 2, or 3 Voidlings if you would cast other abilities. So when you cast E on a minion wave, when you cast Q on a minion wave, you get little stacks so that you can spawn up to 3 Voidlings. So you can get, pretty reliably, 3 Voidlings every roughly 8 seconds. Okay, so you're actually, more frequently spawning 3 Voidlings in a teamfight scenario. You're getting them pretty frequently, right? You buy a Relinomicon, this is now a 6-second cooldown, feels pretty good. Because instead of them charging up every 20 to 16 seconds, they charge up every 8 seconds. And again, you can get 3 every single time. Okay, so you're getting pretty reliably lots of Voidlings out. Okay, so that's actually pretty good then. Right? To unpack that, we're actually getting some pretty good stuff. Now, the cast range is down. They're always starting melee range. They still have to walk over to the opponents. That can still be difficult. Okay, that's fair. They also no longer multiply themselves, so you're not like spawning 1 that spawns 1 that spawns 1 that spawns 1. You're just getting 1 to 3 at the start. Okay, so that's how that works. Cool. We know how they spawn. What's next? Well, they got stat changes. Oh god, that is a wall of text. Don't worry, ignore the wall of text. Let's read this. Basically, the way it works is the rank up incentive on Voidlings is basically dead. If we look back at the patch notes, it goes up by 5 mana cost. Cooldown does not change. The attack damage, the base attack damage does not change. That's based on character level. The bonus damage on rank up is now 2. That's not very good. Its attack speed actually scales with character level. And, okay, the duration of the Voidling can scale with rank. So, again, you have an 8-second cooldown. Okay, they can last longer than the cooldown is now. That's kind of cute. But basically, it lost all its level incentives. And so what we look at is if you were to max this ability first, second, or third, how does it act in 7.11 compared to 7.10? And as you can see, if you were to max it first, it sucks for most of the game. If you were to max it first, at level 9, it is a 40 damage ability per Voidling. That's not very good. As you can see, it used to be 53. That's not too great. And yet, if you leave it for last, just being level 14 right here, like level 14, maxing it last, which means this is 2 points into Voidlings, is more damage than the old maxed first Voidlings in the prior patch. So what this means is the mid to late game Voidling damage is better. Now what I want to also point out, by the way, is this is the DPS calculation, the damage per second of any individual Voidling. It's already accounting for the damage gains with level, the damage gains with rank up, and the attack speed gains with character level. So these Voidlings are doing some cool things with that. All right, so that's kind of cool. Some of these are out of order. That's too bad. That's kind of unlucky. Because there's more changes to... Wow, these are really out of order. That sucks. As we scroll down. And here's the other change. Basically, so we go through the damage changes. Voidlings also have different durability. Okay? Instead of just having... I think it's actually 2 health. I think this is actually out of date, the 3, but whatever. Maybe it's 3. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of irrelevant. But basically, instead of dying every X number of auto attacks and basically getting instantly destroyed by like a Lulu or anyone with the Blade of the Ruin King, it now has real stats. It has real health, real armor, and real magic resist. So again, instead of dying every 2-ish auto attacks, it's their actual physical durability and actual magic durability in the new patch. And as you can see, if you're like a level 4 Malzahar, they have 108 physical health, which means if Draven has spinning axes up, he will one-shot your Voidling. If Tristana blows up, minions around with like a level 4 explosive shot or whatever, or a rank 5 explosive shot, and does 150 damage, it's going to one-shot the Voidlings here. So, yeah, they get one-shot. If they get crit, they go down. They will not get one-shot by like low-damage Ruin King hits. Right, a Blade of the Ruin King Rush champion will not one-shot these, which is kind of nice, and a Lulu can't one-shot them either. Right, at level 5, they have like 120 health. Like Lulu doesn't do that much damage per auto attack, so there's some gain, some loss. The support is worse at killing them, but they die to AoE like really fast. Like they're instantly dead to Crow's Storm or like Karthus Defile. And then also there's a movement speed change. They are slower. They no longer gain double move speed against E or R targets, but they don't get slower when they run away from Malzahar. So it's a more simplistic mechanic, but overall they are generally slower. So they are slower, they don't chase as well. At the very least, they're not worth as much gold when they're killed, but they die in arguably most cases more quickly. However, in the mid to late game, they do more damage, and they are being cast much more frequently. In sum total, it changes where the optimal cases are. Because I think this can... It's hard to say, because there's cases where it's better, and there's cases where it's worth. In sum total, is Void Swarm a stronger or weaker ability? Probably a weaker ability, to be honest. But, like, there's so many changes it's hard to really piece together. I know the goal was to make this ability weaker, and it probably is. Okay, let's move on. Call of the Void has some small changes. It's a higher ability power ratio, which is cute. It self-stuns the Malzahar for half as long, but it is delayed a little bit longer coming out. Basically, Malzahar is self-stunned for half the time, but there is an extra 0.15 seconds before the actual beams cross and deal damage, so it is a more dodgeable ability. It does more damage, and it self-stuns Malz for less. I think this is probably overall a small buff, especially because you might get into more situations where it one-shots the back wave, which is, of course, very good for Malzahar. That's a thing he definitely wants to look for. I don't know what that point would be, but potentially that can happen. Okay. Straight buff from the Malefic Visions, obviously. Bonus ability power ratio. Okay, so that's just a straight buff, obviously. And again, Malefic Visions is in a very touchy place where it's really important to you that you actually finish the last hits with that ability so that you can get your mana back and keep the things bouncing around and getting the last hits. So Malefic Visions is very sensitive to damage changes because of how core it is to mid-Malz's playstyle. And then Nether Grasp has gigantic changes. The Null Zone placed underneath lost a lot of its damage output. It got cut from 25 to 45 down to 10 to 20%. The ability power ratio got cut by 1/3, which is huge as well, but it gained some pretty substantial single target damage with a very high ability power ratio as well. So obviously, to people who aren't your target, it has been straight nerfed by 50 to, 66%. Obviously, that is very large. Let's see if I can find where the null zone is, because unfortunately, Imager moved my things out of order, which I didn't want, but happened. That's unlucky. There it is. So we're going to look at these numbers here. So yeah, it's doing 40% as much damage. The ratio is 1/3 as big. So what we're looking at is this, okay? The part we're going to look at for something that might be close is how good is his single target damage? And I really want to bring some things up. That's, I think, very, very important. Most people did not stand on the entire null zone. Most people got off the pool and didn't take the full damage. So the brunt of the pool nerf is actually not felt. For those who touch the pool at all, yes, they're still taking like that much % less damage, but they're not actually losing that much really. Actually, like, you're not actually going from 45 to 20% because no one stood in the whole 5 seconds of the pool. Almost never. But because you're getting 125, 250, or 375 damage, for sure, even if they did sit in the entire pool before, it doesn't take much HP for this damage to be higher anyway. At level 6 Malzahar, everyone on the map has more than 800 health. At level 11 Malzahar, everyone on the map has more than 1200 health. And at level 16 Malzahar, everyone on the map has more than 1500 health. So you're actually doing more single target damage as the Malzahar. You are doing less ambient damage, but you are doing more damage to your primary target. The other minor point is because the ability power ratio got nerfed on the pool damage, and it got added to some flat AP, really, really high HP targets will have a worse AP ratio because it's a flat AP ratio, but only if they have more than 2000 health, and again, only if they stand all 5 seconds of the pool, which most people will not do. So the nerfs look bigger than they really are, but Malzahar actually gained in single target damage, which is pretty cool. Okay, let's move on. In sum total, Nether Grasp is a weaker teamfight tool, better assassination tool. E and Q are straight better. W slightly weaker, but better in other circumstances. Malzahar is probably about as powerful. And I know one of the goals is to make him a better mid lane mage and to bring him back into that lane. And I think this can help because E and Q doing more damage are very good when you have ability power. Okay, on to the smaller changes. Basically, Ahri was deemed overpowered. I agree. High pick rate, very high win rate. It's like 53%. She's been too good for too long. And so overall, these changes will be a nerf. Losing Foxfire damage, gaining Charm damage, losing Spirit Rush damage. The Charm buff does not make up for the loss of damage from Spirit Rush and Foxfire. In fact, her ideal single target damage lost, looks like, what, 0.16? Is that right? Am I silly right here? Yeah, it lost 0.16 ability power, plus another 0.15 ability power is 0.31. So her perfect single target combo lost a 0.21 ability power ratio, which is not that much, to be honest. These nerfs are going to be pretty small. Like, they're actually not going to mean very much. She'll lose a % or two. She'll still be fine. That's what it comes down to. Caitlyn has some somewhat mathy changes. We're going to first start with the fact that Headshot is no longer charged 3 times as fast via Hurricane. This will let Caitlyn buy more than just a Hurricane as her Zeal item of choice. And honestly, I'm probably going to buy Static Shiv a lot more on her because I love Static Shiv and lightning damage is great. I love me some lightning damage. In fact, I might go Static Shiv Rapid Fire Cannon as a result here. I also really like Hurricane, and to be honest, Hurricane is so good via the 7.9 changes. The attack damage ratio on all the bolts is super high. Maybe you still go Hurricane. Okay, probably, but you lose out. You no longer get the extra single target damage by doing so. So, hey, some choices are being made. And this is, of course, a nerf to Caitlyn. This is the mathy one. Her base attack speed has been reduced, but she gains some bonus. She has more bonus attack speed at level 1, which means her attacks per second at level 1 are the same. However, this affects her scaling, right? Even just her per level stat scaling, in addition to the simple gains of her buying items, it's going to lower her damage output. What that actually puts her at is not too bad. As I try to scroll and figure out where it is, here we go. If you didn't buy any items at all and you just simply played Caitlyn, this is counting runes and masteries, of course, you're like 99 to 98% as fast. So you lost almost nothing from runes and masteries. Even if you built a full build here, you were losing less than 3% of your DPS. So Caitlyn loses up to 2.8% of her attacks per second. And she lost the Hurricane synergy. Really not huge. Really not huge. It's going to matter. The Hurricane synergy is going to matter more, actually. That's the bigger change. But really, it's not going to do that much to Caitlyn. She's going to be the same champion. She's still going to be strong. It's going to be like 0.5% win rate difference. Whatever. So Dr. Mundo gets some small changes. Basically, there's 3 champs that got changed: Dr. Mundo, Scion, and Malphite, who were big Sunfire Cape users. And because Sunfire Cape got much weaker, and it was one of their primary teamfight damage contributions, and they are kind of Juggernauty, they are kind of damage-based, Scion less so, but whatever. Basically, they got some buffs. So Dr. Mundo got some attack damage, and he got some damage on Burning Agony. 5 flat damage on Burning Agony at all ranks. And as far as the attack damage growth is concerned for Dr. Mundo, it's not very big, but we'll show it. And yeah, he's, getting like a 3, well, obviously at level 1 it's the same, but up to 7% more attack damage. Now, of course, his E gives him a damage in the first place, so this is not the end-all be-all, but hey, more damage is always nice. If you live in a world where you're actually going to buy Steric's Gauge, which I could see, I guess, then it buffs that as well. Whatever. He's going to do a bit more damage. That's kind of nice to have. Really cool change to Lee Sin. Basically, now even if you have ping, if you put down a ward and press safeguard, the server is going to know that you meant to safeguard where the ward went, and you're going to be better at ward hopping. So this is kind of cool. I like that we're seeing a lot more of these changes out of Riot, where it's a lot of usability changes because not everyone plays on LAN. This really won't affect pro play Lee Sin at all, but it'll actually do some things for Joe solo queue. This could actually have some meaningful increases. I actually saw some data on how much Karthus and Ryze gained from the changes that went to those champions in like 7.10 or 7.8 or whatever. And I think what came out of it was every Karthus benefited, but only high ping Ryze players benefited. And they did benefit like 1 to 2 to 3% win rate. I forget the numbers, but it actually has impact. Like these changes, they don't look like number buffs because they're not number buffs, but they actually have meaningful impact on the viability of the champion. So we're giving Lee Sin buffs, which is awkward, but that's what's happening. Ward hopping is going to be easier. Mana cost changes to Lucian. Of course, those are pretty easy to look at. Basically, it's this. Very quickly into the game, you have higher mana cost. I don't know why these are green. I'm stupid, but either way, the mana costs get more expensive pretty quickly. And considering that Lucian can run out of mana, these are actually pretty meaningful nerfs. Having a 20 to 25% more expensive primary skill by the end of laning phase is meaningful. This is going to hurt Lucian quite a bit. Is he still viable? Absolutely. But he is no longer, I think in solo queue at least, a must-pick champion. Small buffs to Malphite. Ground Slam has a higher armor ratio. Now I want to point out a couple things that are a little tricky with doing the math here. Of course, this does count his base armor as well, so simply leveling up as a champion. So Ground Slam didn't just gain scaling damage, it gained base damage because he has base armor. And what's more is his W passive also grants more armor, further buffing how much this matters, because Malphite just has a lot of armor for free. And so this counts his base stats with no runes and masteries, assuming you max E second and max W last. You're getting a 5% damage bump on this ability. Just from the base damage, just from his base stats. If you literally bought full MR Malphite, this ability did 5% more damage. What's nice is, of course, it can do even more than that, because it can do up to, if you had infinite-ish armor, 33% more damage because of the armor ratio. So it's somewhere between 5 and, we'll say, actually 10%, maybe 20%, 15, let's say, more damage. It's actually pretty meaningful. Like, this can help your wave clear, this can help your team fighting. It's a pretty low cooldown ability. It's a nice to have. All right, more follow-up changes to Maokai. Basically, the most recent major changes to Maokai made his support no longer overpowered, but did not give enough to his top lane or jungle roles. He's basically sitting at 48% win rate on all 3 roles, and so now it's essentially time for more straight buffs to Maokai, but maybe not, completely overpower the support role because the sapling gameplay is a little insane. Okay, so large changes to sap magic. The cooldown is dropped to 25 or 20 earlier on to the game by 3 and 4 levels. Okay, so he's healing faster, more quickly. That's nice. So in the real world, he's going to heal more in the mid game. And we actually have a thing on that. Let's see if I can find it. as I struggle to figure out where everything is. So that's the second one. Oh, I guess it's everything all at once. Okay, these are all the Maokai passive changes. We'll read the rest from in a little bit. The base healing with no scaling got halved, but the percent health scaling got bumped by 1.5% up to 2.5% by the end game. Actually, yeah. So that's pretty big. What does this mean for Maokai in the real world? Well, we looked at Maokai with no runes and masteries and said, well, what could this be? Okay, well, the cooldown, obviously, you can see, is better at level 6, 7, 8, and better at level 11, 12, 13, 14. So that's kind of nice. For some pretty significant portions of the mid-game, he's going to heal more frequently. He's going to get more heals off in a team fight. That seems nice. As far as his base stats are concerned, how much better is the heal itself? Well, always better in the early game, and then at a couple of small points, it's a little bit weaker. However, the required health to make it better is basically nothing. So Maokai's healing more frequently, and he's essentially always healing for more health. So cool. It's mathy, but it's basically straight buffs to Maokai. And again, because these are some pretty generous HP ratios, it's going to be, instead of this 350 point heal, it could be even higher. Sweet. So Maokai heals for more and he heals more frequently. Great. What about the changes to Sapling Toss? Well, the AP ratio got halved, which again does not matter to top Maokai at all or jungle Maokai at all, but it does matter to support Maokai. He was building Leandri's Torment and stuff like that, so nerfs to support Maokai. The movement speed is awkward because instead of it being free, it scales with boots, and even then isn't going to be any better. And we can look for this. Let's see if I can find it, because it's out of order, and that is unlucky. Here it is. So this is what it used to be in patch 7.10. And you can see in the early game, and even with Boots 1, it is never faster. So saplings are basically always slower. By the time you buy Boots 2, you'll probably be at least level 8, because you're not going to rush Boots 2 as Maokai, so even by the mid-game, it's going to be slower. And then if you really went Swifties or something, then okay, you've got a small time where it's actually a bit faster. But basically, saplings are slower, the AP ratio is lower, but Maokai is tankier. And then the one other small little bit is if you were doing a bunch of saplings camping on a brush, you lose more of the initial burst. So another support Maokai nerf in terms of the explosion damage is only going to be 2/3. You're still going to get, 2x eventually, but basically one sapling blowing up by itself compared to, I think it takes 3 or 4 saplings before it's actually a nerf. I mean, as soon as you've got more than one sapling, you're doing less total damage. But like at a certain point, and I think it's 4 saplings, 4 saplings is worse than 1 sapling. So you should never put 4 saplings or more in a brush, because it actually does less damage than having 1 sapling in the brush. I mean, in general, you don't really want to stack saplings that much, but FYI. So Maokai no longer wants to put more than 4 saplings in a brush, more than 3. So that essentially got capped. And the gains for putting 2 or 3 got diminished as well. So these are all pretty big. Someone in chat asked, what about Boots of Mobility and the out of combat benefit? It doesn't matter. As long as you own Boots of Mobility, it's 460. In combat, out of combat is irrelevant. It doesn't factor into this at all. It's just what boots do you own, period. That's all it comes down to. One other change is the sapling brush duration no longer scales with rank. It's just simply 30 plus some % of his bonus health, which is kind of weird. Like, it's weird that health turns into duration, but I've got that one for you. Don't worry. I'm going to hope to find it. Okay, it's not down there. It's probably up here. Should be a short one. There it is. Yeah, sapling rank based on duration. So again, it used to be plus 10 seconds per rank up. But basically the important thing here is how much health you have to buy to equal the old rank duration. Support Maokai, of course, didn't buy health. So his Ruby Sight Stone is going to give him that 400 and give him essentially rank 2 sapling. But only the real OG, like the Cinder Hulk Warmog's Maokai, is going to be at the 1600 mark or whatever and actually have longer duration saplings. So what this means now is the tank Maokais have long duration saplings that can sit in brush a lot longer. And all of these changes, aside from the sapling movement speed change, aside from this change right there, this change doesn't hurt him in any way. This change buffs him, And this change buffs him, so almost all of the tank Maokai's functionality got buffed. And basically all of AP Maokai's functionality got nerfed. Which means that maybe we'll start seeing Maokai supports actually go for Eye of the Equinox and not Eye of the Watchers. Renekton changes that came with the last 2 patches all got reverted. It's been a couple times that a tech designer has gone in and tried to update things in a champion. If they don't work, they get reverted. This happened with minion pathing things about a year and a half ago. It's happening with Renekton as well. So all the bugs where his cancels went away and things like that, they're reverted. So Renekton's back to the old ways, and pretty much everyone who plays Renekton's rejoices. All right, Sion gets some really nice changes. I think these are really, really big because I think Sion is already a pretty good champion. So he got a much shorter cooldown on his W. Now, it's worth pointing out the cooldown only activates once the shield blows up or has been destroyed. So it's not as much of a benefit as you think because it's not 13 to 11. It's like 17 to 15 because the shield has to hold for some duration, kind of no matter what. So this is not as big of a buff as the numbers would indicate to you. The shield scaling going up is quite nice, but keep in mind that the shield... So there's several parts to Sion's W, by the way. There is a base shield value, and then a shield health ratio, and there's a base damage value, and a damage value health ratio. So 3 of those mechanics did not change, only the shield scaling on the shield itself. What this means is, as we find Sion, who is... Oh, who even knows anymore? Here it is. Here's the changes to Sion. And I basically said if you max W second versus third. Now I want to point out, by the way, that the fact that the health ratio goes up is a really big deal. And the amount of this buff is going to be higher than you think because Sion gets free health for last hitting minions. And Sion's going to be building health because he's Sion, he is a tank. So the percentage value of this buff is higher than these numbers indicate, but I did it with assuming he had no items at all. But the shield is a good 10 to 15% stronger, which is really, really quite nice. And if you maxed it second, it is still quite good. If you maxed it third, it is even better in a lot of these cases. Cooldown change obviously is 85%-ish, but it's actually close to 100% because there's a duration that doesn't get counted into this. But essentially, yeah, there's thingies that have been updated. The shield is way stronger, and it's going to be more than actually 20% better because of the ratio buff actually taking over a lot of power. But I guess by the time his max rank, it can only be 20%. Either way, quite good. Mid laners and every squishy ever rejoices. Syndra W radius is down slightly. It'll be harder to land, and everyone rejoices that Syndra is going to require a little bit more skill to play. And everyone rejoices. Beautiful things. Yasuo also nerfs. Basically, all it means is he cannot hold on to tornadoes for nearly as long. Instead of getting to wait 10 seconds between Qs, he can only wait 6 seconds between Qs. And the thing is, really good Yasuos, what they would try to do is they would try to finish a minion wave with their second Q. So the wave is dead and they're running around with a tornado on their sword. And they're running around waiting to throw a tornado at somebody. And they're running around holding onto it with a lasso. And this being 40% shorter is a pretty big deal, where he finishes the wave and goes, where's the Sion? Where's the Aurelia? Who am I going to kill? And you don't have to hide away from him for nearly as much. So that's actually really, really nice. It looks like it's a non-change. And to be honest, Yasuo will still be overpowered after this, but it is actually somewhat meaningful. He will have less pressure. He will still, in my opinion, need more nerfs, but oh well. Zac gets some small nerfs. These are also not big enough. Zac will remain overpowered. I think they should have taken a stronger touch with this champion, but oh well. You are warned a quarter second longer before Elastic Slingshot, which will give you even more time to react to the knockup, which is a pretty big deal. Resetting the hotfix nerfs, which is that the stretching strikes do less damage now. That's cool. Congratulations. Screw you, Zac. He's real strong, though. Icon updates for Abyssal. Banshee's Veil, which is the APMR shield item for the mid lane, is actually getting a... You could arguably call it a nerf. Basically, it makes it a more expensive item. It's a 3,000 gold item now. And because items tend to multiply one another, it means your Merlinomicon comes in later, your Zonia's Hourglass comes in later, your Void Staff comes in later. This is generally considered a nerf. Also, even though it is a 60 MR item, it does not build from Negatron Cloak, which means as a mid laner, you cannot simply just sit on one small MR item and ignore the item. Null Magic Mantle is not a great component to sit on. It's not that many stats. And so forcing you to sit on Null Magic Mantle for another 300 gold to finally combine to a new item is actually a pretty big change. As far as actual efficiency is concerned, it's not a very large change. That's Blade of the Ruin King. Where is it? It's up here, I guess. Banshee's Veil, 7.10 for 711. Technically, the efficiency has gone down slightly. Technically, the item is a bit less efficient, and you sit on components for longer, so those are both small nerfs to Banshee's Veil. Again, they're small. Blade of the Ruin King loses 3% lifesteal because Blade of the Ruin King rushes were probably a bit overpowered, and that's fair to say, so it's a bit too strong of an item, so it's getting nerfed. I really wanted to point something out, which is Blade of the Ruin King over the years. I just found this interesting. So this is 7.4 before the changes ever came in. Before it got changed to become a flat damage active and have better stats. And it was 66% gold efficient, which means you had to carry 1,100 gold worth of efficiency on, you know, a decent active and a very good passive, of course. In 7.5, the efficiency jumped from 66 to 78. You got a worse active, but you only had to carry 700 gold worth of stats. Obviously, it was still overpowered, or it was overpowered, so in 7.9, it got nerfed by 100 gold, which lowered the efficiency to 76, and now you had to carry 800 gold worth of stats on the passive. And now that it lost 3 lifesteal, the efficiency is almost back down to where it was before, right? No one used to buy this item when it was 66% efficient with a pretty strong active that healed and did more damage. Now it's down to 72% efficient instead of 78. So the efficiency gains, right? It had gained about 12% efficiency when it first got buffed. And that efficiency gain is down to 6% higher than it used to be. And that active is still worse. So basically what I'm getting at with this is this item is not really any stronger than it used to be. Like the attack damage and attack speed got shuffled around. The lifesteal, I guess, is slightly higher, so that's, I guess, something. Like, technically, yes, this is still a more efficient item, but it lost a valuable portion of the active, which is more damage and some healing, and people are still going to buy this item first. And the reason I bring this up is because people aren't innovative until something's shoved in their face. So Ruin King is now about, I'm going to say it's about as good as it used to be back in 7.4, and people are still going to be rushing this item because they remember what 7.5 was like. Because it was an OP item was shoved into their face, and they said, oh, we should buy this item from now on. And it's going to have a long-lasting impact. So in addition to the fact that Lucian got some nerfs up there earlier in the patch, Ruin King is worse now as well, and Lucian is now a... He's going to, like, getting a lot out of him is going to require more skill. Lucian is a high skill cap champion as far as marksmen are concerned, and I think just being a crappy Lucian is not going to help you all that much. Create an angel icon, that's cute. Ninja Tabby finally does get a nerf. It is less good against auto attackers. Since everyone's buying Ninja Tabby anyway, marksmen feel good. The Jaces and Talons and Zeds of the world don't care as much about this change, but the Ashes and Caitlyn's do quite a bit. So marksman as a class got slightly stronger because Ninja Tabby did this. Really minor, unimportant cost changes to Nomad's Medallion. Great. Okay, congratulations. No longer tracking crappy minions on the scoreboard. That's kind of good. No longer lies to you when you're laning against Alawi. You don't get to pretend you're winning lane for free. And, oh yeah, sorry. More important things coming in here as well. 10 bans coming in patch 7.11. I glossed over it for a second, but in 7.11, it's going to start with North America normal draft, but quickly over time, it will go to the rest of the leagues as well. When Champ Select starts, I believe you'll have time to hover the champ you want to play, then everyone slots in a ban, and Champ Select begins. Faster Champ Selects, more total bans. It's going to be fun. I'm always going to ban things in my role, And as long as my teammates don't ban the things I'm hovering, I'm going to have nice matchups for me. That's going to be fun. I'm excited about this. I'm very excited about this. Custom Games Tournament Draft now uses the esports draft with the 10 bans it kind of intermingled in the middle of the draft phase. That's kind of cool. When you invite friends to a lobby, they automatically get invite privileges. I think that's a good change. That's cool. Doombots of Doom is back in the rotating game mode, which is awesome for me as well. That's great. Item set creator is in the League client update. Yes, I am so excited about this. The interface looks pretty sick. And I'm going to be doing a series of videos about making item sets for every role, or at least for a lot of different champions, because I think that is a valuable skill that people should learn. That's excited. That's exciting. I'm excited about this. This is going to be great. I love item sets. I think if you take the game seriously, not making an item set is a huge flaw. I see so many pros search through the item shop and take time, and they can't buy elixirs in time or switch trinkets or whatever, and it's like, this tool has been in the game for years, and you're silly for not having used it, so it's a competitive edge that I use that everyone else should use as well. Minor VFX updates. None of these bug fixes actually matter. And that's going to be it for the patch. Thank you all for tuning in to the patch rundown. If you have any comments or criticism, please leave them in the comments below or in the chat on the stream. I will catch you for the next video sometime later. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.